Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day wherever you're at, whenever you're watching this. It's been a while since we've done a Kaiserreich video. There haven't been a whole lot of channels out there with videos that I haven't already necessarily covered. Someone in the comments had left a request for me to check out this video by JD Media about what happened to the Entente after France was taken over, the French Revolution happened, etc., and they were kicked out, the French monarchy, etc. So yeah, I'm eager to check this out and see their part of the story, you know, leading up into the events of Kaiserreich. So this is called The Mission to Liberate France, Kaiserreich Documentary, National France by JD Media. So links will be down below as always in the description to the original video without my commentary and reaction, and to JD Media's channel. So please do me a favor, if you enjoy this video as we go through it, be sure to give it a like. And yeah, if you enjoy the content he puts out on his channel, you know, check out his stuff, give him a sub, show the man some love. If he's got a Patreon, check out his Patreon, show him some support if you want to. If you'd like to join us when I do these reactions live as I am right now, we'd love to have you guys come in and join our discussions that we have before, during, and after the videos. There's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I have to offer. You can get early access to videos, stuff like that, so just check it out if you want to take your support to my channel to the next level. Regardless, I appreciate you guys just taking their time to come in here and hang out and watch this video. So with all that said, let's jump into this here. So again, Mission to Liberate France, Kaiserreich Documentary, National France by JD Media. The Second Weltkrieg. The Republic endures.
As the French Civil War that followed the Revolution of 1920 drew to a bloody conclusion, the French Republic, teetering on the brink of collapse, chose exile over surrender. With limited options, the government and military high command decided to retreat from the mainland. Utilizing the French Navy, they executed a strategic withdrawal across the Mediterranean,
they went down to Africa,
French
right?
Algeria, which remained under their control.
Right.
In Algiers, a bulk of the French establishment, along with loyalist military forces and government officials, regrouped to form a government in exile, clinging to the remnants of their authority in the overseas département. Initially, the exiled government believed that the revolutionary state, taking shape on mainland France, would soon collapse under its own weight.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me, right? Like, because obviously the revolution was still fresh. They had overthrown the monarchy, you know, left in exile. So I would assume that they probably thought, especially after, you know, World War I and them still recovering from it, that, you know, the revolutionaries wouldn't have a chance of actually getting anything established. Little did they know.
Instead, they watched with dismay as the revolutionaries solidified their power and formally proclaimed the Federation of the Commune of France. In a bitter twist of fate, the exiles pinned their hopes on the German Empire to suppress the new regime. However,
and yeah, honestly, it is kind of surprising to me in this kind of situation. I mean, I guess it could just, from what I remember, because it had, like I said, it's been a while since I've checked out some Kaiserreich stuff. I think it was just a situation where Germany was still too busy at this time trying to consolidate everything they've gained from World War I, right? So I don't think they really had an interest in starting another war, you know, with France at that time. But it would have been an opportunity for them to take France. I mean, after the government had been exiled, if they had decided to invade, they probably would have succeeded. And they probably would have taken France, you know, which again, that would have changed things dramatically in this, you know, timeline.
Germany instead signed a peace treaty with the revolutionary government, recognizing it as the legitimate successor to the French Republic.
I also think Germany was still worried about Russia and what they were going to do at this time. They probably felt that Russia was the bigger threat, and they didn't want to commit forces to an offensive, on the other side of Europe.
With little regard for the exiled administration. The government in Algiers issued strong protests, but their efforts were in vain, as the rest of the German-aligned world quickly followed suit, granting recognition to the Commune. In contrast, the Entente and its allies firmly recognized the exiled government as the legitimate authority of France. Refusing to be cowed, the exiles reaffirmed their claim to represent France and its empire. They pledged to honor their commitments to the Entente alliance and vowed to reclaim the mainland, no matter the cost. Overall, the exiled government retained control over North and West Africa, which now served as its de facto mainland. It also maintained authority over several overseas départements, including the strategically vital island of Corsica. While the exiles officially upheld the name French Republic to assert their claim as the legitimate government of France, they were colloquially referred to as National France by much of the world. In countries within the German sphere, where the exiled state was held in low regard, it was often derisively called Sand France in casual conversation.
Interesting.
The government vowed to be a direct continuation of the previous mainland regime.
Wonder how that nickname came to be. Is it just because, they're in Africa and like that desert part, Interesting. Kind of a strange nickname.
Maintaining its democratic principles and pledging to honor the Republic's constitution. However, this commitment placed them in a precarious position. The government was widely discredited, particularly among the military and nationalist factions, who blamed it for France's defeat in the Great War and the eventual fall of the nation. Some even went so far as to hold democracy itself responsible, arguing that only an uncompromising leader could have saved France from its darkest hour. The exiles, along with the Pieds Noirs, white French settlers already established in Algeria, formed a significant portion of the population, and in some major cities they even constituted a majority. However, overall, the European population remained a small minority, ruling over millions of native Algerians and other Africans. To maintain control, the government relied heavily on the army, using it to enforce colonial rule and suppress native resistance.
Interesting.
In the early years,
they just got done with, a revolt. They potentially are having to, deal with another one where they moved to.
The military was stretched thin, struggling to quash uprisings and maintain order across West and North Africa. By early 1922, the government had established a tenuous grip on its territories. While the colonial situation remained precarious, the native populations had largely come to tolerate the new administration, accepting that it was here to stay. Although the region was far from stable, unrest and resentment still simmered. The army's presence was scaled back and redeployed, while rule from Algiers was increasingly enforced by native elites loyal to the colonial government. The democratic administration faced constant challenges, descending into petty infighting and becoming increasingly perceived as incompetent by the exiles. This instability fueled real fears that the colonial regime could collapse entirely. In 1926, Marshal Philippe Pétain, a revered hero of the Great War known as the Lion of Verdun, decided that the situation could no longer be tolerated. With the backing of the army, particularly Great War veterans, he led a coup against the government. Rather than outright overthrowing the democratic regime, Pétain pressured Parliament to elect him as acting president and declared a state of emergency.
Interesting.
As the chief,
so they end up having someone over a revolt. He pulls off a coup, but essentially kind of like, what's the term we're looking for? I guess not a bloody one, right? I don't know if that's the right term or not. But yeah, then essentially forces Parliament to elect him.
Of the French military, Pétain faced little resistance and quickly consolidated absolute control over the nation. The majority of the
So it's like, is this going to end up becoming more of a dictatorship, you know, now? Again? Because that, in like the Kaiserreich timeline, there seems to be a lot of that. Where either monarchies are being overthrown and socialism is kind of taking over, or more of a fascist kind of dictatorship is taking over. Like at this time period, in this timeline, in the Kaiserreich timeline, like democracy is not doing quite as well.
The army openly supported his leadership, and news of his presidency was even met with cheers in certain parts of the country. Pétain effectively re-established a thinly veiled junta, though he refrained from formally annulling or amending the
just
constitution.
Slapped that kid straight in the head.
As a result, the Republic and its institutions technically remained intact on paper.
Yeah.
The government allowed political parties to operate and attend Parliament, creating...
So yeah, it's just like a paper government, right? Like he's actually running things, but they have the illusion that they still have a parliament and that I guess people are able to like vote and do things.
The illusion of democracy.
Right.
In reality, however, Parliament merely served as a rubber stamp for the Marshal's decisions. Pétain addressed the nation and reaffirmed the Republic's mission to liberate the mainland. If a beaten country is divided against itself, it dies. If a beaten country can unite, it is reborn. Vive la France! Pétain believed that only strong authoritarian rule could save France.
There's a lot of that going around at this time.
Morally guided, military-led government as the nation's best hope for reclaiming the homeland. While his early rule focused on stabilizing and consolidating control over the colonies, his administration quickly shifted its efforts toward preparing for war against the Commune of France. A significant portion of the national budget was allocated to the military to achieve this goal, with much of the nation's industry reshifting to be devoted almost entirely to supporting the needs of the armed forces.
Doesn't surprise
Pétain
me.
and his key advisors, largely composed of Great War veterans, believed that failing to reclaim the mainland would lead to an existential crisis. Without access to the resources of France itself, they feared French Africa would inevitably crumble under the weight of time and rebellion.
Yeah, I was going to say, right, like, it's interesting. So, they... Like, I wonder in this time, right, like, would it be better for them to focus more on trying to expand through Africa and take more territories there? Because there's obviously a lot of resources there. So they could easily try to, you know, either make alliances, take territories by force, try to rebuild their armies, you know, build up their navy and try to, you know, maybe have a much greater naval influence, try to block off, you know, any kind of trade that the French Commune is trying to, you know, set up and establish overseas, because they could essentially kind of control the Mediterranean, right, you know, with where they're at. Yeah, so I wonder if really overall that might have, but again, it kind of comes down to how much resources, manpower etc. Do they really have? Do they have the time to do that? Kind of a situation as well, because I mean that could take years, decades, etc. for them to really establish themselves as like a superpower in, a new continent from being exiled.
In a candid...
And again, they're still obviously recovering from being exiled and recovering from World War I, etc. So, but you also got this guy trying to push for, again, retaking the homeland. So it's going to be war either way. So is it play the long game, try to establish yourself, a solid footing in Africa and really establish yourself there? I guess kind of turtle up, real-time strategy talk, and then try to, retake the motherland later. Try to establish more diplomatic ties, try to put more diplomatic pressure on the commune, keep them from being able to expand, etc. Maybe even ally with Germany on certain fronts, because I'm sure, again, Germany probably wouldn't want, socialism to start spreading through Europe, etc. Even though it would be bittersweet, or not bittersweet, but you know what I mean, right? It would kind of be a bad look for them after losing World War I and being exiled to try to ally themselves to Germany, but what else are you really going to do,
moment with his ministers, Pétain remarked, "There is a key difference between us and the English exiles. The English exiles live in a stable, secure land in the New World.
Right.
We, however, face revolt, hostility, and fury from those beneath us. For us, it is not just survival. It is a matter of life and death."
Right. So, I mean, again, that kind of goes into what I was saying, right? Like, take the time to establish yourself there, deal with any kind of revolt that's going on from local countries, nations, etc. Do your best to get them on your side, build up, add them to your army, and have a greater army than what you potentially could have going into trying to retake the homeland.
The sentiment reflected the harsh reality of French rule in Africa. For the native populations, life under French governance was oppressive.
I bet.
Although millions were technically considered French citizens, they lived under the indigenous system, which relegated them to second-class status. Subjected to collective punishment, a parallel and often unjust legal system, heavy taxation, forced labour, and widespread mistreatment, they were regarded as inferior by the French colonists. While some voices...
Which obviously that is part of the problem right there, Like, you want to try to get these people to work with you, right? Like, I don't know the exact passage, right? But that's part of Sun Tzu's Art of War, I forget the exact quote, but it's something along... The basic gist of it is it's better to win the hearts and minds of your enemies than it is to, kill them, essentially, make your enemy your ally and add their numbers to your army kind of a situation, I think is what the overall gist of it was. So it's like, yeah, instead of treating these people poorly, help lift them up, get them on your side, and have them help fight with you to retake the homeland,
Voices within Parliament advocated for improving their conditions. These proposals gained little traction. The administration's reliance on native labour, deemed essential for preparing the reconquest of France, ensured that the oppressive system remained firmly in place.
I bet.
To enforce its control, the government relied heavily on native elites loyal to the French state, who acted as intermediaries to maintain order in their communities. At the same time, a growing class of French-educated natives began to emerge, shaped by a government-designed education system that emphasized Frenchness and loyalty to the colonial regime. This generation, along with native war veterans, often desired reform, but largely remained faithful to the state and was prepared to fight for it. While Petain's government was widely accepted and the democratic parties temporarily sidelined, various ideological factions continued to advocate within the nation. Republicans, Democrats, nationalists, reactionaries, and monarchists all vied for influence. Among these, the Royalist movement gained...
What is the word I'm looking for? It's a lot of split factions, essentially. Not the word I was looking for, but yeah, that's not exactly a united front with all that going on.
Significant traction. For many, the perceived collapse of the Third Republic, despite the exiled state retaining its name, underscored the belief that only a restored monarchy could save France. The Royalist movement coalesced around the Parti Action Française,
right,
which championed the restoration of the Bourbon-Orléans dynasty. Although the party abstained from participating in elections, it built a vast network of influence among radicalized Catholics and intellectuals. The movement's philosophy was encapsulated by its leader, Charles Maurras, who famously declared, "To love France today, one must hate what she has become." Deeply anti-parliamentary,
interesting,
the AF sought to dismantle the republican system and reinstate a Catholic, integralist, absolute monarchy.
Really?
They supported Prince Jean, Duke of Guise, the current head of the House of Orléans. However, under the Republican law of exile, all male members of France's former royal houses were barred from residing on French soil, forcing the Duke to live abroad. Witnessing the chaos that had befallen his country, Jean reached out to the AF and, in 1933, issued a manifesto calling for a royal government in place of one led by voiceless parties, a direct challenge to Petain's administration.
Now we're having potential for civil war happening again now between those two factions, the Pétain side and the monarchists.
Contender for the throne was Louis, Prince Napoleon, the pretender to the imperial throne and head of the House of Bonaparte.
Interesting.
While his claim lacked the widespread support enjoyed by Prince Jean, largely due to the disastrous reign of Napoleon III, the prince nonetheless openly expressed his desire to serve in the French army and play a role in the liberation of the mainland. As the Republic entered the 1930s, the government increasingly prioritized preparations for a future war with the Commune of France, often at the expense of addressing domestic issues. This neglect led to mismanagement in parts of the country, fueling unrest among the native populations in West Africa. Within the military, disagreements arose over the future direction of its doctrines. Despite this, efforts were focused on ensuring the army would be fully combat ready by 1938. The military structure at that time consisted of a relatively small corps of professional soldiers, including French regulars of the colonial army, native regiments, and the Foreign Legion, supplemented by a large conscripted force. Additionally, a new branch of the French Marines was established, modelled on the rigorous training of the newly formed Royal Canadian Marines, and specifically designed to prepare for amphibious assaults along the southern coast of France.
I think at this time, right, weren't the Canadian Marines supposed to be like the elite force out there? If I'm not mistaken, in one of the other Kaiserreich videos, the like Canadian, Special Forces, Marines, or whatever, at that time, were supposed to be like the best of the best that you could have. So it's not surprising that they would try to model themselves after that.
However, a growing divide emerged within the ranks of the military. Younger, rising officers argued that significant reforms were urgently needed, criticizing Pétain and his aging military staff for their reliance on outdated Great War tactics. This lack of innovation, they warned, left the army ill-prepared for the realities of modern warfare. Two men emerged as the leaders of two competing schools of thought on military reform, each with their own distinctive nickname, the Bear and the Rooster. Henry Moorduck.
One's called the Bear and one's called the Rooster. That's kind of a bit of a difference in imagery when you think about that in your head, you know, like, oh, the bear, you know, that gives imagery of this great strong beast. The Rooster, not so much.
Known as the Bear, was an infantry general who rose rapidly through the ranks during the Great War, earning a reputation for sheer bravery and exceptional command ability. While close to Pétain, Moorduck was a critic of the military establishment. He argued that France's defeat stemmed from a lack of experienced officers and an out-of-touch high command. To address this, he advocated for bold reforms, including the mandatory retirement of all officers over the age of 56.
Wow, really?
And the complete restructuring of the armed forces by merging all branches.
That the merging of the branches kind of makes sense, right? You know, so you could have like one defined chain of command at the moment, but the mandatory retirement of anyone over 56, like, I could see that in certain ways, right? Like, you don't want them, like, you want their experience in their leadership, right? Like, they've been through, anyone who's over 56 that's in the military at this time, they lived through, you know, World War I, and they have experience in battle. You're going to want that moving forward. So, you know, having them as officers in your army would be the smart way to go, where they can lead men make decisions instead of just, you know, being out there in the field as soldiers. I could see, though, on one hand, right, though, on the other hand, that they might see them as loyal to Pétain because they're part of the old guard. And so that's why they're doing this, right? They're trying to dismiss anyone who could work against them that wouldn't be loyal to them and their new cause. That would be the only thing that really would make sense in this situation, right? Because otherwise you're just losing experienced officers that can lead your men.
Actively rebuilding the military from the ground up. The other figure was Charles de Gaulle, known as the Rooster, who was a lieutenant colonel. A fellow veteran of the Great War, de Gaulle had distinguished himself leading troops at Verdun before being captured, later escaping captivity and returning to the fight. Ambitious and highly regarded, he became both a protégé of Pétain and a renowned military theorist. While he shared some of Moorduck's views on France's defeat, de Gaulle favoured a different approach. Rather than wholesale reorganisation, he emphasised the need for greater cooperation across branches, advocating for expanded use of armoured units supported by air power. He also championed greater autonomy for officers and the creation of an additional corps of professional soldiers to complement the existing forces. Both men sought to influence military opinion and sway Pétain himself by publishing books outlining their reform proposals in 1936, positioning themselves as potential future leaders of the nation. Moorduck, who was already serving as Ministry of the Interior in Pétain's cabinet, grew increasingly disillusioned with the Marshal's disregard for even the pretense of democracy. In contrast, de Gaulle, though maintaining a close relationship with Pétain, held fundamentally different views. A staunch monarchist aligned with Action Française, de Gaulle believed that France's true revival could only come through the restoration of the monarchy.
I mean, yeah, it looks
Tensions
like,
between
again, we're heading for a civil war between them with the monarchists, and I don't know what Pétain's side would be called. Yeah, between Pétain's side and the monarchists.
Between the native populations and colonial authorities continued to simmer throughout the late 1920s
Simmer down
and
now.
early 1930s. The government was forced repeatedly to assert its authority, suppressing uprisings and responding to sporadic clashes with Tuareg tribesmen who were pillaging villages in Niger.
And yeah, I was gonna say, like, that's also another thing that has to be going on, right? Like, while they're still trying to restructure and establish themselves, excuse me, they're still having to deal with native, revolts and roaming war bands or whatever, attacking them. So
Meanwhile, communard agents were believed to be operating within the country, stoking dissent, while pan-Arab supporters spread propaganda against the regime. In the autumn of 1935, administrative mismanagement in French Sudan resulted in a poor harvest, triggering widespread food shortages and famine across the region. The ensuing hardship fueled significant unrest among the local African population, culminating in a large-scale revolt against French rule. The regime's response was sluggish, hampered by poor communication and coordination, leaving the colonial garrison unprepared to effectively contain the uprising.
wow.
Although the revolt was largely unorganized, the sheer numbers of African rebels overwhelmed the local garrison, forcing it to retreat in disarray. Once the extent of the uprising became clear in Algiers, the government ordered the full suppression of the rebellion. This involved mobilizing the ground army to restore order and allocating additional reserves to reinforce the effort. Marshal Franchette Desperie, Pétain's trusted deputy and vice president of the Superior War Council, was tasked with overseeing the suppression of the revolt. Upon linking up with the Sudan garrison, the ground army, under the command of General Maurice Brissot, regrouped and unleashed a relentless artillery campaign against the rebels. While effective, the bombardment inadvertently destroyed parts of the infrastructure the French had painstakingly built in the region.
Yikes. Well, and I mean, also, right, like, granted, you're dealing with, an uprising, but, like, are these resources that you can really afford to be using in a situation like this? You know what I'm saying? Like, you kind of have to, but it's going to be setting you back because you're using ammunition, shells, and stuff like that you're building up to, again, retake the motherland. And you're having to deal with this revolt. So again, like, I think the sound, from my point of view, anyway, the sound tactic, I think, would have been to try to establish yourselves more, play the long game, really get the local populace on your side, start conscripting them, build a greater army, and, expand as much as you can, and establish a solid foothold in Africa. And then while you're doing that, use diplomatic, tactics, etc., to do what you can to, negotiate alliances, do whatever you can to keep the commune suppressed, and, get your navy built up and start having them go out there and start trying to, blockade trade routes, or, at least seize trade from the commune, et cetera, et cetera. Again, a lot of that does take time. So, but I feel like that would be the smarter play than just being so focused and trying to rush things, because that never turns out well.
Brissot pursued a ruthless approach to
And I mean, obviously, now they're having to deal with a revolt because of that.
swiftly end the rebellion. The heavy shelling shattered the morale of the tribes, forcing many to retreat in disarray. Capitalizing on this, Brissot ordered his forces to pursue and divide the scattered rebels.
I love these kinds of, like, top-down maps like this, where you can see kind of how some of the strategy really plays out. I would like to see more videos of stuff done like this in Kaiserreich, and as well in, like, the 40K universe, Warhammer Fantasy Universe, stuff like that.
Meanwhile, Desperie engaged with tribal leaders, leveraging their influence to pressure their tribesmen into surrendering and restoring order. The revolt was ultimately suppressed, and colonial rule was maintained. However, the uprising left a lasting impact, deepening tensions between the native population and the French authorities across the region. For many French exiles,
having to rebuild any kind of infrastructure that, you know, was damaged or lost, and having to commit more resources to that, committing to having to, you know, remake any kind of ammunition, resources like that, medical resources to anyone that's been injured, etc.
The unrest served as a wake-up call, shattering any sense of complacency they had developed while living in exile. It underscored the unsustainability of their position in the colonies and reinforced the belief that a war with the Commune was not only inevitable, but essential for their survival. By 1936, trust in Pétain was waning. Civilian support for his regime was declining, and even within the army, the backbone of his rule, confidence in the Marshal was eroding. Pétain's favoritism towards his protégés had placed them in many key positions. While these individuals were undoubtedly competent, this practice left other qualified officers sidelined, fostering resentment. Critics worried that such favoritism risked encouraging doctrinal rot and that Pétain was surrounding himself with sycophants. Amid this growing discontent, some within the Marshal's inner circle openly criticized the state of affairs.
That's never
Notably,
good.
General Henri Modac emerged as a vocal opponent,
Interesting.
rallying a faction of liberal-minded military officers around him.
I mean, when you have people under your command openly criticizing and speaking against you, that's obviously not a good thing, and again, leaning more towards civil war.
Modac's movement evolved into a significant power bloc, supporting democratic principles. That same year, the British King George V died in exile, and Pétain attended the funeral in Canada. Death deeply affected the aging Marshal, who had considered the king a personal friend. Pétain saw a striking parallel between himself and the king, realizing that he too might die in exile, never to see his homeland again. It is believed that this moment marked a turning point for Pétain, as he understood that the struggle to reclaim their homeland would likely fall to the next generation. The Marshal knew that his two clear choices for a successor were General Modac or General de Gaulle. When Marshal Desperie, Pétain's key ally, retired a few months later, the Marshal made his decision and appointed General Modac as his successor. This was seen as a clear sign that Pétain was endorsing Modac over de Gaulle in the eyes of the nation. Later, in March 1936, early one morning, the Lion of Verdun announced his immediate resignation and retirement, citing old age as the reason. In his final words, he invoked the iconic order that he had given at the Battle of Verdun. "Courage, be strong, we'll get 'em." As he departed, crowds gathered to cheer him, and
that's got to be rough, man, being in his position, right? Like it was obviously stated, right? Like he has a yearning to go home, to see his homeland again and retake it for what he believes is for his people, you know, for the rightful French people and, you know, the rightful French government, etc., etc. But just beyond any kind of political reasons, just wanting to be able to actually go home and then have your last days be where you grew up and the land that you love, you know? So, I mean, that's got to be a rough realization for him, you know, seeing that it's not going to be something that's going to happen more than likely in his lifetime, and having to, I guess, come to terms with that fact that he's not going to see his homeland again, and to just try to set things up for success for the next generation as best you can. That's got to be rough, but obviously, but you also gotta, you know, you gotta hand it to him in a way. Just it takes a lot of courage for someone to have that kind of realization and not try to like force things along and essentially take your country and people down with you. You know what I mean? So props to him.
Any lingering discontent with his leadership evaporated. The people hailed him as the true hero of France, and his departure was met with widespread affection and respect. Following the Marshal's resignation, the Parliament invoked Article 7 of the Constitution, and both chambers convened to elect a new president. The only name put forward was that of General Mordac, who was elected unanimously.
Wow.
Upon taking office, he promised to lead the nation to victory, retake the mainland, and implement the military reforms he had long advocated. While Mordac sought to focus on these goals, his position of power was far from secure. General de Gaulle, whose ambitions to lead had not waned, remained a formidable rival. After being sidelined by Pétain in favour of Mordac, de Gaulle had grown closer to the monarchist movement and was now openly aligned with it. His obsession with restoring France convinced him that drastic measures were needed, including ending the Republic itself, to save the nation. While both men schemed against one another, the inevitable was approaching. The Second Weltkrieg loomed.
It really seems like that's kind of a big theme in this timeline, where politically it seems to come down to like two men with almost opposing positions really having to essentially commit to almost like a civil war situation, even more so in America, with like several factions being emerged with several different leaders, you know, with Howie Long and I can't remember the names of the other, you know, faction leaders for the different belief systems in the States, but I think there were like 5. You know, the United States ended up getting divided into 5 different territories, essentially, you know. But, you know, Russia's got, you know, 2 big factions with their leaders going at it. France has it here. I don't remember if the Ottoman Empire had that. I don't think so. They had some other issues, but it does seem to be a theme where like civil war keeps happening in these different countries as things are trying to get reestablished.
And only one man could lead France. Mordac and de Gaulle were on a collision course, destined for a confrontation that would determine what kind of exiled France would fight for the soul of the mainland.
Yeah.
Would it be a kingdom or a republic?
All right. Well, there we go. There we have it. That was Mission to Liberate France, Kaiserreich documentary, National France by JD Media. Links, as always, will be down below in the description to the original video without my commentary and reaction into JD Media's channel. So please do me a favor, you know, go over there, give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and check out the rest of the content on his channel and hit that sub button if you want to give the man some support. Check out, I'm sure he's got a Patreon, you know, check out all that stuff if you want to take your support to that next level for his channel. I pretty much gave most of my thoughts on this one as we went through it. You know, I really feel like I felt like a situation where Pétain really wanted to, like, obviously he wanted to retake the motherland, and it really felt like they were in a great hurry to reestablish themselves in Africa, and instead of playing the long game and really trying to get the support of the natives and, like I said, getting them on their side and conscripting them and building their armies and their navies, because again, they're going to have some kind of naval force to, you know, travel over there. And then you know, like they said, they had a branch of the military trying to train and emulate the Canadian Marines, because they're obviously going to have an amphibious invasion. Basically, you know, their D-Day kind of a situation, you know. But yeah, instead of like playing the long game, establishing themselves, building an army, making alliances, trying to, you know, slow down the spread of the French Commune that had taken over and exiled them, it really just felt like they were in a hurry to try to take things back, and that led to uprisings and a lot of splitting of factions with different, you know, some factions like the monarchists believing that and really getting the support of the church, you know, behind them, believing that they need to get rid of democracy and the parliament and everything, and they just need to go back to a straight up monarchy. Others thinking, you know, more authoritarianism kind of ways of doing things, and then some, you know, wanting to keep the parliament and keeping the republic. So obviously that leads to a lot of political infighting and no decisions being made, and it just looks like they're heading towards their own civil war between what is it, De Gaulle and I can't remember already, between these two gentlemen, you know, here, De Gaulle, and I can't remember this guy's name. I'm so bad with remembering names. But yeah, so well, it would be interesting to see, you know, obviously what happens, where things go towards, you know, what's going on with the Second World War, because like I believe right at this time, again, Russia's got their own civil war going on between the Democratic Party and their own kind of fascist party. I can't think of that's not the word I'm looking for, but anyway, yeah, they have their own civil war thing going on. United States has, you know, a civil war essentially going on there with multiple different factions being split up from them. Britain's still trying to, I guess, kind of really assert their overall control in Canada, you know, and the Canadian locals are trying to readjust to how their rule is, and them trying to, you know, obviously retake Britain. The spread of, what is it called now? I'm having a brain fart. It's not totalism, because that's kind of like the radical version of it that happened in France. I'm drawing a blank right now on what it's called, but it's the version of socialism that took over in France, what the commune became. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but, you know, them dealing with the spread of that. And then of course, you know, Germany's expanding their power and having, you know, being the only real superpower that came out of World War I at this time, you know, etc. So lots of interesting things going forward. Again, I would love to see, obviously I would love to see more videos that I could, you know, do some reactions on in general in the Kaiserreich universe, but I would love to see things taken on into, you know, what happens, because it's all this timeline's all building into World War II. So I would love to see it like a continuation of that, like this timeline going into World War II, what happens in the different factions. Does you know, did the United States, do we end up reuniting ourselves or not? Do the British end up retaking their homeland or not? Do the French, you know, do they have a civil war, or are they able to reconcile and unite and retake the homeland? Does Germany, you know, just invade what is the French homeland? You know, and then do the French royalists here have to make an alliance with the commune against Germany? You know, all of these things. I would love to just see kind of where this timeline of history were to go. Yeah, again, great video by JD Media. Again, if you guys are out there, if you have any other channels that you know of that have any Kaiserreich videos that you would like me to check out, please let me know down in the comments. You know, feel free to link them, as I would love to check them out. I'm really fascinated by, you know, this alternate history timeline, and would love to take a look at some more moving forward. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video of mine, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and the channel grow. Lets the YouTube algorithm gods know that you enjoy this kind of content and you want to see some more. If you'd like to take your support to the channel to the next level, you can join us, you know, live right now, as I am doing this with my YouTube members. We'd love to have you guys come in and hang out and join our discussions that we have before, during, and after the videos here. But yeah, there's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I have to offer. So you can take a look at that stuff and get early access to videos, prior to any kind of reaction requests, join us when we do, you know, these reactions live, etc., stuff like that. So if you would like to take your support to the next level, you can check all that stuff out and see if that would have any interest for you. Regardless, thank you guys very much. If you're still here watching at the end, it means a lot. I greatly appreciate you watching this video all the way through. I hope you're having yourselves a wonderful day, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Have a wonderful day, everybody.